One of the most significant days in New England's history, Patriots' Day, April 19th, 1775, the first shots of the American Revolution at Lexington and Concord. So it's a good week to talk about flags. About 2 months ago, Don Kerrigan brought us the story of the plan to have Mainers vote whether to change our state flag back to the one used in 1901. He's back with more lessons about flags many of us likely never knew. Hey, Don.
Yeah. Just when you thought you were safe from me talking more about flags, here we go. But this is fascinating stuff. That referendum now looks like it's going to be delayed for another 2 years, the vote. And it has rekindled interest in Maine's 1901 flag, which we learned was Maine's first state flag, even though we had been a state for 80 years at that point. One of many surprises we picked up from flag historian Dave Martucci. They may be local, or national, or maybe other things, but flags do get our attention.
The concept of flags goes back at least 7,000 years that we know of, and probably way further back than that.
Safe to say, Dave Martucci loves flags. He's been studying them much of his life.
The fact of the matter that humans feel a need to have and make flags is a fascinating subject.
We met to talk about the fascinating subject of changing Maine's state flag back to the original 1901 flag, or something like it. But quickly discovered I had a lot to learn. For example, while Maine had been a state since 1820, we never had a real state flag until 1901.
The state flag concept didn't exist before that. So when the United States became a country in 1776, the concept of even a national flag didn't exist. Only kings and armies and navies had flags. Nations didn't have flags. People didn't have flags. That wasn't known.
But wait a minute. What about this, the so-called Betsy Ross flag from the Revolutionary War?
There were different flags for the Continental Army. Washington tried to standardize those, which he succeeded in doing after the war was over. It wasn't until the French Revolution that the French said, we want a flag like the United States, a national flag. But our flag was really the first one to be identified with a movement of the people rather than a royal or a military situation.
The British flag that we knew then and know now was for the army and the king, not for the country.
The British Union Jack belongs to the Crown. The Crown at any time can make a ruling that nobody can use it. Anytime they want. You couldn't do that in this country.
That really, the U.S. as a national flag was the first?
The very first.
That's astounding.
It's true.
And even during the Civil War, he says, Maine did not have a real state flag. The militia, the military had flags, and the Union Army had a flag.
Now, the Civil War made a great change in flag design in the North because of the fact that they needed to determine, they needed to distinguish between the Union and the Rebel forces. Rebel forces flags were almost all red, so we had to have blue flags. That was the Union color. So for the first time, originally Maine's flags were white with our shield of arms on it. And then during the Civil War, they became blue.
And then in 1901, Maine's legislature decided it was time to designate an official state flag. At first, it was going to be blue with the state coat of arms. Sound familiar?
But the Adjutant General at the time, General Richards, he decided that that was not really appropriate for a number of reasons. First of all, it was a complex design and it would be expensive to make. And right straight from the time we became a state, we've been very budget conscious.
So General Richards came up with the design of the pine tree and the North Star. The 1901 flag, you say, I'm going to pick this up a little bit, you said was very close to this.
This is an exact copy
It
of
is.
the known flags and of the lithograph that General Richards had published so that people could know what the design's supposed to look like.
But just 9 years later, to honor the memory of aging Civil War soldiers, Maine changed again to the blue flag with the coat of arms, the state seal. Basically, the flag we have today. Dave Martucci says that law was very detailed about what the flag should look like, maybe too detailed.
What the law actually specifies doesn't look like any flag flown today. Because it's supposed to be on a 9-foot pole with 2.5-inch fringe and cords and tassels and a spearhead on the pole and embroidered in silk.
And now the push is on to change again, back to the simple pine tree and star from 1901.
The state law that's being proposed
Yeah.
is exactly the same as the 1901 law. And it says it's a buff flag with a pine tree in the center and a blue star in the upper hoist. That's it.
Dave says if it passes, let each of us choose the version of the pine tree we like best. Flags, it turns out, can sometimes be complicated things. Yes, they can. See why I'm fascinated by this? So Dave Martucci says there are in existence now 10 to 12 different designs of that 1901 flag that various companies have put out there, including one that he created himself, all with different versions of the tree. He said he hopes sort of that's how things continue. So in light of that, I had my friend, excellent artist and illustrator, Glenn Chadbourne, come up with a design for the Maine state flag, the pine tree and star, with a big, more realistic looking pine tree and a more mature looking pine tree. So we'll see what happens with that. This referendum vote, the current plan is to have a committee formed to study and come up and recommend an actual design, one design, before the referendum vote. That's why they want to delay it. So I'm going to submit this as one more idea and see what comes of that.
There you go. Great stuff, Don. And it's incredible, too, to know that it wasn't until 1901
Isn't that amazing?
that we had one of these.
Yep.
It's awesome stuff. Thanks, Don.
Welcome.